Splatfest is almost here, and the age-old question of how to win more of your matches arises again, and Turf War has a lot of intricacies to it, at least certainly much more than we give it credit for. Hey there, it's Hazmi here, and in this video I'll introduce the most important parts of Turf War and how you can drastically increase your chances at winning by understanding the basics and advanced rules that get used even in Japanese Turf War Cups by pro players. For more Splatoon 3 guides and Salmon content, check out the rest of the channel and subscribe if you're interested. The goal of Turf War is to have your team more of the map painted than the enemy team. That's the core concept. It's not about who got more splats or how much you painted. Whether you are winning by 0.1% or 30% is irrelevant, there is no difference in the end. We often focus way too much on weapons, what's the best, what's the worst, or look at pure lists instead of first learning and understanding what wins these game modes, which is why anarchy battles are also a mess. Most players don't care to learn strategies or tactics that matter the most, and instead brute force their way into higher ranks. Turf War isn't different, and understanding what wins a Turf War is vital in getting better. I would say Turf Wars have three different stages that matter: the beginning base painting, Turf War in the middle, and the final 30 seconds. Despite the comments saying that only the last 30 seconds matter, all of them matter quite a lot, especially if you're just playing casually, and we'll talk about all of them in order. Paint your base. We've heard this a lot, and it was actually quite a large meme at the launch of Splatoon 3, and for a good reason. So should a team paint their base at the start of a game? Yes and no. Well, there's actually two popular strategies here that's being used in Japanese tournaments nowadays. The first one is that no one paints the base, and instead everyone paints a line all the way to the middle, and every time they respawn after a splat. And this way your home base will be painted and you'll recharge your specials each time you reach the middle. It's really good for fighting and pushing middle at the start, but not so great for painting, especially if you don't get splatted much. You will have to go back and it's quite uncomfortable. The second strategy, and this is the more popular one but also the one I recommend, is that one person on the team paints the whole base turf at the beginning. Immediately here, I think the worst tip I see in a lot of videos and guides is that they make fun of players who neatly paint every corner and inch of the home base, calling it a waste of time, but in reality this is what you need to do, and the closer the match is, the more important it becomes. Have you ever lost a turf war by 0.1%? Yes, well, if your home turf would have been perfectly painted, likely that wouldn't have happened, and let me explain why. Different areas on the map have different priorities on how important it is to paint as neatly as possible, and what determines that priority is how hard it is for the enemy team to paint over it. Your base is a place the enemy team cannot paint over in almost all cases unless you're being spawn camped, and so you can secure every inch on the ground as points towards your victory. It is something the enemy team cannot take away from you, and the percentages add up really fast. And if you really believe only the last 30 seconds matter, then you don't really lose anything by spending more time painting your base now, do you? By painting your entire base perfectly, you have an immediate advantage against your enemy team, as most don't really like to waste time doing it. It's also one of the reasons Turf War isn't that popular to watch at tournaments. It doesn't mean it's a complete garbage game mode, it just means what its name implies. It's more about Turf War than team battles, and it's not so exciting to watch. An average team base looks something like this if you play casually. It's full of patches, and most of the attention is around the middle as long as the teams are balanced. You can see how much more could have been painted on the team's home, and it does matter a lot. Now this is how home bases look like in an actual tournament. You can see how the base is neatly and perfectly painted. So does it make them noobs? No, they understand how important it is to secure all of your base. It's 3 points you're missing out on otherwise. Since we established how important it is to paint your base, the question is, who should do it? Well, in a casual match, there really is no way to control this, right? And you can't be forced to always play a painter weapon and do it for your team. You all deserve to have fun. So it's pretty much case-by-case situation, so instead, let me explain what's preferable. If possible, only one player should be painting the home base, and the rest of the team should head to the middle and keep the enemy team back, until you can regroup later. At this stage, the team should mostly play defensive while the base is being painted. The person painting the home turf should ideally be someone, well, who has a good painting weapon. Duh. But that's not enough. It should be a good painting weapon that can also reliably paint corners and harder to reach areas. Otherwise, we get back to the previous point of leaving a patchy home turf that also takes a long time to paint. So while you can paint really well with a big swig, let's say, it might take longer to paint everything perfectly with it, and it's more suited to harass the team in the middle. Whereas a shooter like a Splash or a stringer like the Reflux can pretty much paint anywhere with ease. The next most important thing is your weapons kit. The painter should have a kit that does not waste its special while painting the home base. I said this at the beginning when explaining the two strategies. The home base can be used to gather specials. Now if the person painting the base has a crab tank or an ultra stamp, that's pretty much wasted. You'll be just painting with your special on full and all those precious points will be gone. Preferably, you want a special that can be used effectively the moment it's full, such as a Tenta Missile, Killer Veil, or even a Tacticooler can work here, as you still very much contribute to the tension in the middle while painting the base, which is why a Reflux is such a popular pick for turf wars. So to summarize, you need a weapon that can paint a lot, fast, and has a special that can be used from afar. After painting your base, we get to the middle stage of Turf War, which I would say is like the second minute until the last 30 seconds. This part of Turf War is just as important as any other, and I believe this is also where most of the mistakes are made in casual matches that cause losses, and also the last 30 seconds to be a disaster. At the start, I mentioned painting perfectly is very important. You want to secure every percentage you can get. In the middle, it's the opposite, and you want to be as messy as possible and focus on covering as much turf as possible. To do this, make sure you are aiming right in front of yourself, not below on the ground, not above, as shooting forward will always cover the most turf, even if it will be patchy. The reason why this is important is, well, to cover more turf in the middle of course, but also to waste your opponent's time by being annoying. This works especially well if you recognize there is a player on the enemy team who loves painting every inch on the ground. You'll be spraying paint all over the ground this way that's very annoying to re-ink and essentially take away turf from the enemy constantly. Apart from paint, your goal at this stage is to take control over the middle and hold it. This is another mistake I see in most casual matches, that once a team gets a few splats or wins a team fight, they will often continue to push and try to spawn camp instead of holding the middle. The middle part of the stage, especially with Splatoon 3 design, is the most powerful area you can be in. And pushing forward, you basically give up your advantage in hopes of getting a few splats, not to mention you give up the opportunity to have time painting some turf. Try to stay in the middle, secure it, and take advantage of the enemy team panicking and trying to take it back. These team battles in the middle are the reason that even in Turf War, you should bring weapons that you can fight with and splat opponents. It's not enough to be a good painter. If you get splatted, you wouldn't accomplish anything that way, it's still PvP. Painting and splatting is equally important in Turf War, which is why you can bring any weapon in. Just remember to do what you're good at and not tunnel vision only on inking turf. Maybe bringing a shooter that you can splat opponents with is going to work better than bringing in a Reflux that you can only paint with. A popular strategy that a lot of people use, and it's present in tournaments, though a lot less frequently, is painting behind the enemy team and taking away their base turf. This usually doesn't work against teams because they're coordinated and will look out for this, but it can work really well in casual matches, but timing is crucial to make it work. The problem is that most players do this at the worst possible time. Either way too early in the game when it just doesn't matter and just gets repainted, or too late in the match in the last 30 seconds when you're much more needed in the middle and your team might lose a fight because you weren't there. I believe the best time to attempt some sneaky enemy base painting is right before the last 30 seconds. Normally, everyone tries to prepare for the final seconds by charging up their specials, staying alive and hope to win a final battle, and either defend their position or turn the tides of Turf War. By successfully breaking through the enemy and painting over their base turf before that at around the 45 seconds mark, you mess up that concentration and cause damage to their base that's really hard to fix, since someone has to go back and paint over or they lose valuable turf, especially if they don't splat you. But in that case, they will also have a weaker presence in the middle for the last 30 seconds, which will help you win a fight. Timing is everything about this, and yes, it does revolve around the last 30 seconds, but you can see it matters how you prepare for those last seconds. Just make sure if you attempt to do this that you have a weapon you can fight with, otherwise you will likely just get splatted and risk losing the middle for your team. This is why you don't see this that much in tournaments, because everything is about securing the middle and with the least amount of risks possible. which is why Turf War can be really boring to watch. There's no point in taking risks until the very end, it will just make things harder for the teams. Finally, we get to the last 30 seconds of Turf War, arguably the most important part in Turf War where everything can flip if you mess up. But that doesn't mean you can't prepare for it and minimize the risks. By painting the base perfectly, we already made sure we have a good percentage of the map painted. If the teams are relatively balanced, the fights in the middle also went well and potentially you might be holding it too, which certainly helps. And if there was a good opportunity, someone might have painted a bit behind the enemy team to annoy them before the end. The problem with the last 30 seconds is that in casual games, that's not where most teams lose, but right before it. It's extremely important to prepare properly for the final push in Turf War by not taking extra risks that cause you to splat and leave your team without a member, protecting the flanks so enemy can't paint behind you, gather up your specials for the very end so you can use them together. These are all things that can flip a match, and I still don't see a lot of players focus on it. You can't really complain that the last 30 seconds is the only thing that matters if you yourself don't even do the basics of preparing for it. By this time, you need to be ready for a big team fight. You should be alive and your special should be ready. The more powerful your special is, the more important this is, since it will have an even bigger impact. Booyah bombs and ink strikes are especially popular at this time, but even a zipcaster can be used well to jump behind the enemy and ink their base. The last 30 seconds can have multiple different strategies too, depending on the weapons and the teams. But in the end, you need to be ready to fight, and it doesn't mean you have to fight. You should still take minimal risk. In fact, this is when you should play the safest. Whether you need to splat your opponents because they paint better than you, or you need to survive because you have the better painter weapons, is quite situational. But seeing it can help you choose the right strategy at the end if you should use your specials more aggressively or defensively. To summarize, make sure you are not splatted and you have your specials ready for the last 30 seconds to try to make the best of it. If you do this, you will already be better than most people in Turf War who don't prepare properly for the end. We've gone through all the parts of Turf War by now, and I think I summarized the most important aspects that you should look out for. And if you practice them, I'm sure you'll start to see how much of an impact it has on your games, and how much it helps to understand tactics instead of just jumping in and hoping to win. Turf War has a lot of tricks and tips you can still do, but by playing more and more and practicing, you'll slowly learn what works and what should be avoided, and this experience can't really be replaced by watching any guide online. If you're looking for other players to play with though and practice these, feel free to join our community Discord that's linked in the description, where you can find other players looking to get better or just have some fun. I do plan on making more Turf War content in the future, and if you thought this video was helpful, do let me know in the comments so I can plan more videos of this topic in the future. If you have any questions, also feel free to ask below and we can try to answer them. Thank you so much for watching, good luck in your Turf Wars, and I'll see you the next time.